Providence Municipal Court, Rhode Island. The woman at the podium won't make eye contact. Case number 8847, Maria Santos, unpaid parking violations totaling $3,127. Her hands grip the wood edge like she's steadying herself on a boat. Judge Caprio glances at the file, then at her. Ms. Santos, what do you do for work? She clears her throat. I'm a home health aide, Your Honor. I take care of elderly patients. Her voice cracks. My daughter has leukemia. She's 7. The hospital bills? She stops mid-sentence, pressing her fingers to her eyes. The courtroom goes completely silent. The judge sets down his pen. For a moment, no one moves. Then Judge Caprio leans forward, his voice soft but clear. Miss Santos, I need you to look at me for a moment. Can you do that? She lifts her head, tears streaming. We're going to figure this out together. The clerk had called the case 10 minutes earlier. Case number 8847, defendant Maria Santos, multiple unpaid parking violations. The morning light filtered through the tall courtroom windows, catching dust motes in the air. Maria stood at the wooden podium, her purse strap cutting into her shoulder, hands trembling slightly as she held the citation paperwork. Judge Caprio looked down at the file spread before him. The charge sheet listed 17 separate parking tickets accumulated over 18 months. Most were near Hasbro Children's Hospital. The original violations totaled $480. With late fees, collection charges, and compounding penalties, the current balance was $3,127. Ms. Santos, you understand why you're here today? She nodded quickly. Yes, Your Honor. Tell me in your own words. She swallowed. I have unpaid parking tickets, a lot of them. The judge glanced at the paperwork again. Do you know how many? 17, I think. That's correct. He looked up at her. Do you know how much you owe? Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. Over $3,000. The judge leaned back in his chair, studying her face. She was thin, maybe late 20s, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. Her work uniform, navy blue scrubs, was visible under her open jacket. Miss Santos, what do you do for work? I'm a home health aide, Your Honor. Her hands twisted together. I take care of elderly patients, in their homes. How long have you been doing that? About 3 years now. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. That's important work, hard work. Thank you, Your Honor. He looked back at the file. These tickets, most of them are in the same area, near the hospital. Why were you parking there so often? Maria's breath caught. Her fingers went to her eyes, pressing against the bridge of her nose. When she spoke again, her voice was barely audible. My daughter, she has leukemia. The courtroom went completely still. Even the clerk stopped shuffling papers. I couldn't find street parking, Your Honor. The parking garage was $15 a day. Her voice cracked. I couldn't afford it. Not with everything else. So I would park wherever I could find a spot, even if it was illegal. I knew it was wrong, but I just needed to get her inside. Judge Caprio set down his pen. He waited, letting the silence stretch for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. Let me make sure I understand. You've been making payments on these tickets? Yes, Your Honor. I've sent money. Not a lot, but whatever I could. The judge picked up another sheet of paper. According to this, you've paid $340 over the past 14 months. That sounds right. He frowned, running his finger down the column of numbers. But the original tickets were $480. You've paid $340, so you should owe $140, maybe a bit more with late fees. He looked up at her. But instead, you owe over $3,000. The math doesn't make sense to me. Maria's shoulders sagged. The late fees, Your Honor, and the collection charges. Every month the amount got bigger. I tried to keep up, but how much were you sending each month? $25, sometimes $30 if I had it. And where did that money go? She looked confused. I sent it to the city parking department. No, the judge leaned forward. When you sent that money, which tickets did it pay off? The old ones or the new ones? Understanding dawned on her face, followed by a look of despair. I don't know. I just thought it would help. The judge nodded slowly, his expression darkening. Not at her, at something else. The user prompt is empty, so I cannot determine the primary language. However, based on the thinking block being in English, here is my summary. Orchestrated dialogue-driven narrative progression through character revelation. Good progress. I need to continue with the dialogue-heavy style, keeping beats authentic and emotionally resonant. Moving into Act 2 now, where the judge's questioning reveals more depth about Maria's situation. Beat 4 should be where the judge asks about her daughter directly, and Maria reveals Sophia's leukemia diagnosis and treatment schedule. Ms. Santos, Judge Caprio's voice was soft now. Tell me about your daughter. What's her name? Maria took a shaky breath. Sophia. She's 7 years old. And she has leukemia. Yes, Your Honor. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. That's what they call it. When was she diagnosed? Maria thought for a moment. 19 months ago. April. Almost 2 years now. The judge glanced back at the file. The first parking ticket was dated May of that same year. He didn't point this out. He just listened. What does her treatment look like? She goes to Hasbro Children's Hospital twice a week for chemotherapy, sometimes more if she has complications. Maria's voice steadied slightly as she talked about her daughter. It's working. The doctors say she's responding well. That's good news. Yes, Your Honor, it is. A small, tired smile crossed her face for the first time. She's so brave. Braver than I am. I doubt that, the judge said quietly. Maria looked down at her hands. The appointments are in the afternoon, usually around 3 o'clock. I work the early shift so I can pick her up from school and take her. Judge Caprio nodded. And the parking situation at the hospital? There's a parking garage, but it's expensive. $15 every time. The street parking is all metered or restricted. She swallowed hard. I know that's not an excuse, Your Honor. I know I broke the law. I didn't know what else to do. The judge studied her for a long moment. The courtroom was quiet except for the soft hum of the ventilation system and occasional shuffle of papers from the gallery. Ms. Santos, tell me about your schedule. What time do you start work? 6 in the morning. And you work until when? 2 o'clock. Then I drive to Sophia's school, pick her up, take her to the hospital by 3. And after the hospital? Maria's expression tightened. We get home around 8 usually. Sometimes later if the treatment takes longer. Then it's dinner, homework if she feels well enough, bedtime. She paused. And then I do it all over again the next day. What about Sophia's father? He's not in the picture, Your Honor. It's just me and Sophia. Other family nearby? Anyone who can help? She shook her head. My mother lives in Texas. My sister's in California. I moved here for a job 3 years ago, before she stopped. Before Sophia got sick. Yes. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair. So let me understand this. You're working full-time, taking care of a sick child by yourself, managing hospital appointments twice a week, and trying to keep up with parking tickets. I tried, Your Honor. I really did try. I believe you. He said it simply without drama. But tell me this. The parking, why didn't you just walk from wherever you could park legally, even if it was farther away? Maria's eyes filled with tears again. Have you ever tried to walk 10 minutes with a 7-year-old who just finished chemotherapy, Your Honor? In February? When it's snowing? The question hung in the air. The judge didn't answer. He didn't need to. I chose being late to my job over making my daughter walk. I got written up 3 times for being late. The 4th time, they let me go. You lost your job? Yes, Your Honor, last November. But you're working now, as a home health aide. I found another job, a different agency. It pays less. She said it matter-of-factly without self-pity. But they're more understanding about the schedule. Judge Caprio made a note on his pad. Let's go back to the payment plan you mentioned. You tried to set one up with the city? Yes, Your Honor. I called the Parking Violations Bureau. They said I could do a payment plan, but the minimum was $200 a month. And you couldn't afford that. No, I was barely making rent, so I just sent what I could. $25, $30 when I had it. I thought, her voice broke slightly. I thought it would help. I thought if I kept paying something, they wouldn't what? Wouldn't boot my car. Wouldn't take me to court. She looked up at him. But here I am anyway. The judge flipped through another page. It says here you did get booted, Last month. Maria nodded. I had to borrow my neighbor's car to get Sophia to the hospital. When I came home, there was a boot on mine. I had to pay $150 to get it removed. Where did you get that money? I didn't eat lunch for 3 weeks. Saved the money from my food budget. The simplicity of the statement hit harder than any dramatics could have. The judge was quiet for a moment. Ms. Santos, the payments you were making, do you know where they were applied? I assumed they went toward my balance. They did. But the way the system works, payments go toward the newest violations first. So your $25 would pay off the most recent ticket, the one with the smallest late fees. Meanwhile, the older tickets kept accumulating interest and penalties. At 12% per month. Her face went pale. 12%? Compounded monthly. I didn't know that. Judge Caprio leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bench. His voice was steady, but there was an edge to it now, not directed at her, but at the system she'd been trapped in. Let me see if I understand this correctly. You've been sending money every month for over a year. You've paid $340, but because of the way the payments were applied and the way the fees compound, you now owe almost 7 times what you originally owed. Yes, Your Honor. Her voice was barely a whisper. And during this time, you've been working full-time, caring for a sick child, managing medical appointments, and trying to stay afloat financially. Yes. What else is happening in your life right now? Any other financial pressures? Maria's laugh was short and bitter. I'm behind on rent. 2 months. My landlord has been patient, but I don't know how much longer. She stopped, took a breath. Sophia's treatment is mostly covered by insurance, but there are things they don't cover. Medications she needs. Special foods when she can't keep anything down. The co-pays add up. How much are you behind on rent? $1,400. And groceries? What does that look like? She looked down. We eat a lot of pasta, rice, things that are cheap. Sophia needs protein, the doctor said, but meat is expensive, so Her voice caught. I do the best I can. The courtroom was completely silent now. Several people in the gallery had stopped pretending not to listen. Miss Santos, are you afraid of what might happen if you can't pay these fines? Yes, Your Honor. What are you afraid of? That they'll garnish my wages? That I'll lose another job? That... She stopped, pressing her hand to her mouth. When she spoke again, her voice was breaking. I'm afraid I won't be able to take care of my daughter. That's all I'm afraid of. Everything else I can handle. But if I can't take care of Sophia... She couldn't finish. She stood at the podium, shoulders shaking, trying desperately not to fall apart completely. Judge Caprio reached for the box of tissues on his desk and held it out. Take your time. Architected narrative turning point, revealing character priorities. Good emotional build. Now moving to beat 8, where the judge asks the hypothetical question that sets up the turning point. This should be where Maria reveals what she would do if the debt was dismissed. Catching up on rent, buying real food for Sophia, the judge waited. Maria took a tissue, wiped her eyes, took a breath. Around the courtroom, people shifted in their seats. The clerk was no longer looking at her computer screen. After a long moment, Judge Caprio spoke again. His voice was gentle, almost conversational. Ms. Santos, I want to ask you a hypothetical question. If I dismissed all of this today, if you walked out of here owing nothing to the city, what would you do with that money you'd save? She looked up at him, confused. Your Honor? The money you're trying to scrape together to pay these fines, if you didn't have to pay them, where would that money go? Understanding slowly dawned on her face. Hope flickered there too, but she seemed afraid to let it take hold. She stopped and started again. I would catch up on rent, so we wouldn't lose our apartment. What else? I would buy groceries, real groceries, fresh vegetables, chicken, fish, things that are good for Sophia. Her voice grew stronger. The doctor said she needs nutrition to help her body fight, but I've been buying the cheapest things I can find because that's all I can afford. If I didn't have this debt, she stopped herself, as if saying it out loud might jinx it. The judge nodded slowly. Anything else? I would stop having panic attacks every time I see a parking enforcement officer. The words came out in a rush. I would stop waking up at 3 in the morning, worrying about how I'm going to pay for everything. I would. Her voice broke again, but this time it wasn't from sadness. It was something else. Something like hope mixed with desperation. I would just breathe, Your Honor. I would just be able to breathe. The silence that followed was profound. Someone in the gallery sniffled quietly. The clerk dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. Judge Caprio sat back in his chair, looking at Maria Santos. She stood at the podium, exhausted and vulnerable, and trying so hard to hold herself together. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. Miss Santos, I've been sitting on this bench for a lot of years. I've seen a lot of people come through this courtroom, and I've learned something important. He paused. The law's important. Rules are important. People need to pay their parking tickets. But sometimes, he gestured at the file in front of him, sometimes the system loses sight of why we have courts in the first place. Maria watched him, barely breathing. We have courts to serve justice, and justice isn't just about enforcing rules. It's about understanding context. It's about seeing the whole person, not just the violation. He looked directly at her. This is why discretion matters. This is why judges exist. Your Honor, He held up a hand gently. Let me finish. You're not here because you're irresponsible. You're not here because you don't care about the law. You're here because you're a mother trying to save her daughter's life. You made a choice, an understandable human choice, to park illegally so your sick child didn't have to walk through the snow after chemotherapy. His voice took on a different tone now, addressing not just Maria but the courtroom itself. And then the system punished you for that choice, not just with the original fines, which were fair, but with a cascade of penalties that turned $480 into over $3,000. Fees that compounded faster than you could pay them off, even though you were trying. He shook his head. That's not justice. That's a trap. And municipal courts shouldn't be in the business of trapping people who are already struggling. Maria's hands covered her face. Her shoulders were shaking. Miss Santos, look at me. She lowered her hands. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I'm dismissing all of it. The words hung in the air for one frozen moment. Maria's knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the podium, her knuckles white. The clerk half rose from her seat, instinctively ready to help if the woman fainted. Your Honor? Maria's voice was barely audible. What did you... I'm dismissing all of it, Judge Caprio repeated, his voice firm and clear. You don't owe the city of Providence anything. $3,127. Gone. Dismissed. Finished. She made a sound that was half sob, half gasp. Her whole body shook as she tried to process what she'd just heard. But how? She couldn't form complete sentences. I don't understand. Can you? Is that allowed? I have discretion in these matters, and I'm exercising it. He said it simply, as if it were the most obvious decision in the world. You've been trying to do the right thing. You've been paying what you could. You've been showing up to work, taking care of your daughter, doing everything you're supposed to do, and the system has been punishing you for it. I don't... Maria pressed her hands to her mouth, trying to hold back the sobs. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. But she couldn't stop herself. Thank you. Thank you. The words came out between gasping breaths. Oh my God, thank you. The courtroom erupted. Not loudly. This wasn't a television drama. But there was a ripple of spontaneous applause from the gallery. A few people stood up. The clerk was openly crying now. Judge Caprio let it happen for a moment, then gently raised his hand for quiet. Miss Santos, you need to hear something else. She wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself enough to listen. You don't owe the city anything, which means that money you were trying to scrape together. Use it for rent. Use it for groceries. Use it for your daughter. His voice softened even more. Just take care of Sophia. That's all I want you to do. Can you do that? She nodded frantically, still crying. Yes, Your Honor. Yes, I will. I promise. For a moment, she just stood there, crying too hard to speak. Her whole body shook with the force of it. Not just tears, but the physical release of 18 months of accumulated stress, fear, and desperation, finally breaking free. The judge let her cry. He didn't rush her. He didn't tell her to compose herself. He just waited, patient and kind. After what felt like a long time, Maria managed to take a shuddering breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Don't apologize. I just, I can't believe—" She wiped her face with both hands, the tissue dissolving into shreds. The clerk silently handed her several more. "Thank you. I keep saying thank you, but I don't know what else to say. You don't know what this means?" "I think I do," Judge Caprio said gently. She shook her head, still crying but trying to smile through it. "No, you don't. You can't—" She stopped, took another breath. "My daughter's going to have real food tonight. I'm going to go to the grocery store and buy chicken and vegetables and fruit. And I'm going to tell her that someone was kind to us, that someone saw us and helped us. You do that. She asks me sometimes why bad things happen to good people." Maria's voice cracked again. "She's 7 and she's asking me these questions because she doesn't understand why she's sick. And I never know what to tell her. But now," she pressed her hand to her chest, "now I can tell her that good things happen too, that people care, that someone helped her mommy when things were really hard." Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable but warm. "Miss Santos, you don't have to say anything else. I understand. Just go take care of your daughter." She nodded, still wiping tears. "I will. I promise I will. I know you will. You've been taking care of her all along." He paused. "You're a good mother. Don't ever doubt that." At those words, Maria broke down again, covering her face with her hands. Beat 11, 385 words. The judge gave her another moment. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red, but her expression had changed. The terror and desperation were gone. What remained was exhaustion, yes, but also something that looked like hope. "Miss Santos, I want you to do something for me." She nodded quickly. "Anything, Your Honor." "When Sophia gets better, and she will get better, I have faith in that, I want you to tell her this story." His voice was warm but serious. "Tell her about the day you came to court scared and worried, and tell her what happened. Not because I did anything special, but because I want her to know that kindness matters, that compassion exists, that when she grows up and has the chance to help someone else, she should do it." Maria was nodding, tears still streaming. "I will, I promise. Tell her about the day kindness won. I will tell her. I'll tell her everything." She swallowed hard. "She'll remember this. We both will. Forever." Judge Caprio smiled, a small, genuine smile. "Good luck, Mrs. Santos. To you and Sophia both. I hope the treatment continues to go well." "Thank you, Your Honor." She said it one more time, her voice breaking but clearer now. "Thank you for seeing us, for listening, for—" She stopped, unable to find words big enough. "Go on," he said gently. "Go buy those groceries. Go home to your daughter." She nodded, still crying, but smiling now too. She started to turn away, then stopped. She looked back at him, her hand pressed to her heart. "You're doing everything right," he added quietly. "Everything. Don't forget that." Maria mouthed the words "thank you" one more time, then turned toward the courtroom exit. Her steps were unsteady but lighter somehow, as if a physical weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Several people in the gallery touched her arm gently as she passed. One woman handed her a fresh tissue. Another whispered, "God bless you." The clerk waited until Maria had reached the door before calling the next case number. Maria Santos stopped at the courtroom door. For a moment she just stood there, one hand on the frame, her back to the room. Then she turned around. Her eyes found Judge Caprio. She raised her hand in a small wave. Not a formal gesture, just a simple human acknowledgement. "Thank you, I see you. I'll remember this." The judge lifted his hand in return, the smallest nod. "Go on. You're going to be okay." She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked through the door into the hallway. The sound of her footsteps faded. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang. The clerk rustled papers. The courtroom settled back into its ordinary rhythm. Judge Caprio looked down at the file in front of him. Case number 8847. He picked up his pen and wrote across the top of the page, "Dismissed, full balance cleared." He initialed it, dated it, and set it aside in the completed stack. The clerk leaned toward her microphone. "Case number 8849. Defendant Robert Chen, expired registration. A middle-aged man stood up from the gallery and walked toward the podium. He looked nervous. They all did. Judge Caprio glanced at the new file, then up at the man approaching. "Good morning, Mr. Chen." "Good morning, Your Honor." And the court moved on. Because that's what courts do. They keep moving. Case after case, person after person, each one carrying their own story, their own struggles, their own reasons for standing at that wooden podium under the bright courtroom lights. But somewhere in Providence, a mother was walking to her car. She was thinking about the grocery store, about fresh chicken and vegetables, about telling her daughter that something good had happened, about rent she could finally pay, about breathing, really breathing, for the first time in months. And in a hospital across town, a 7-year-old girl with leukemia was getting through another day of treatment, not knowing yet that her mother had just been given a gift. Not knowing yet that someone had chosen mercy over procedure. Not knowing yet that $3,000 in parking fines had just become 5 words that changed everything. In Providence Municipal Court, the morning light still filtered through the tall windows. The judge kept listening, and every small case still mattered.